this video, I'm going to talk about the early presidents of the new nation. So it's Unit 5, the new nation, Quarter 4. For the new nation, we're going to be talking about the early presidents of the United States and how their actions helped to shape and really define the United States as we know it. In this video, I'm going to be covering George Washington, the first president. In future videos, I'll be covering each of the other presidents: John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, a little bit of John Quincy Adams, and a lot of Andrew Jackson. These presidents are really important in our nation's history, and they really help shape what you are seeing in the world right now in 2020. So, without further ado, George Washington. A couple things that you need to know about George Washington before we begin. The most important fact is that George Washington did not want to be president of the United States. In fact, he actively tried to not be the president, but he was begged by everyone. He was told that he was the only person that could actually do the job. And in fact, when the Electoral College went and elected the president, he was unanimously elected by the Electoral College. Now, he's the only president to ever have this actually happen. He was so popular that the other person running against him, John Adams, voted for George Washington. So that tells you everyone really wanted George Washington to be the first president. Now, George Washington had a lot of problems because he had to create the presidency from scratch. There were no rules, there was no decorum. He literally was creating things as he went along. In the process, he's going to create four precedents. A precedence a precedent is not a president. A precedent is something that other people will follow. They are sort of unofficial guidelines that all future presidents follow. And finally, you need to understand that not everything was great for George Washington. In fact, he had to deal with multiple issues and multiple problems from both within his cabinet as well as outside. So, what are these four precedents or unofficial examples? Precedent number one, the title of the president. George Washington ultimately is going to decide that you should call the president Mr. President. The second thing is he decided that two terms was enough time. Now, up until Franklin Delano Roosevelt, every president served two terms and then stepped down. They did not run again. Once Franklin Delano Roosevelt ran and he ended up being president four times, the minute that he passed away, we immediately put up the 22nd Amendment, which basically limits the presidency to two terms or 10 years. But George Washington said after 8 years, it was time for the nation to move on. The third precedent that he set was he developed the cabinet. Now, the cabinet are the advisors to the president. George Washington considered himself to be a gentleman farmer, and he understood there was a lot he did not know. So he decided that he was going to surround himself with the brightest and best minds. For the Treasury Department, he's going to pick Alexander Hamilton, who is someone who is his clerk during the American Revolution. For the Secretary of State, he's going to choose Thomas Jefferson, who was really our first ambassador to France during the Revolution. For the Secretary of War, he's going to pick his friend Henry Knox, who was another general in the American Revolution. And finally, the Attorney General is going to be Edmund Randolph. Now, of these four individuals, really the only two that you really need to know for this story are Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. These two gentlemen hated each other with a passion, and in fact, their hatred and their arguments in George Washington's cabinet are going to lead to the first political parties that are created. And the final precedent is George Washington, when he stepped down, decided to give a speech called a farewell address. And every president that has served their entire term has given a farewell address. Basically, what has the president learned as president, and what are some suggestions for for the country moving forward? So those are the four precedents. Well, talk about some of the problems. Well, first problem, the Whiskey Rebellion. You see, in Massachusetts, farmers started to rebel over the tax that the government had placed on whiskey. Now, it's important to understand that this is the first serious challenge to national power. The farmers that are rising up, they are former soldiers in the Continental Army. Remember, they fought over the slogan of no taxation without representation. And the minute that they have this new freedom, the first thing the government does is turns around and puts a tax on corn whiskey or any type of whiskey. And this upsets a lot of farmers. So George Washington leads a force of volunteers. And this is important. The United States government does not have a sitting army or standing army at this point. So he leads a bunch of volunteers and he arrests as many of them as he can. He ends up pardoning all of the foot soldiers to show compassion, but he executes the leaders. And this is an important thing because George Washington needs to show that he's compassionate, but he's also tough. Another problem is political parties. George Washington did not believe in political parties. In fact, in his farewell address, he's going to say that political parties are going to destroy the country. And George Washington is the only president to not belong to a political party. Now, political parties, as I said earlier, are going to be created from conflict within his cabinet. You're going to have Alexander Hamilton, who wants a strong federal government, a strong national government. He does not trust people. He thinks people are inherently bad, and the government must protect people from the bad people. Because again, the purpose of government is to protect you from other people. So he becomes what is called the Federalist Party. Thomas Jefferson, writer of the Declaration of Independence, does not believe in strong national government. In fact, he wants strong state governments because the state governments represent the will of the people. So he's going to be an anti federalist, or when he creates his political party, the Democrat Republicans, sometimes shortened to the Republicans. There is a cabinet battle that I'm going to ask you guys to watch. That is on another video, but I'm going to skip this. So, what are these? How do these two political parties differ? Well, Let's start with leaders. Alexander Hamilton is the Federalist. Thomas Jefferson is the Democrat Republican. Each of these people find a certain group important, the most important group for the future of the country. The Federalists believe it rests in the hands of business, the rich. They will create the jobs. They will help bring the country to great things. Thomas Jefferson believes that farmers are really the future and agriculture is important. Gentlemen farmers, like all of the founding fathers. For the national government, the Federalists believe in a strong national government, whereas Democrat Republicans want a weak national government. To help the national government be strong, Federalists believe, when they read the US Constitution, in what is called a loose interpretation, that there is flexibility. For instance, it says the government may have an army and a navy. Well, it doesn't say that, the Constitution doesn't say that we can have an air force. Well, there's a part of the Constitution that says the government can do anything that is necessary and proper. So, Alexander Hamilton, if he were alive when airplanes had been invented, would say, yes, we should have an Air Force. In fact, that's how we actually got an Air Force. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson said, no, 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 no. If the Constitution says Army and Navy, you can only have an Army and Navy. He has what is called a strict interpretation. There is no wiggle room for the government. When it comes to the Bank of the United States, Alexander Hamilton loves the Bank of the United States. In fact, that is literally his baby. Democrat Republicans absolutely hate it. And that video that you were going to watch is going to be a debate about the Bank of the United States and about how they really do not like each other. When it comes to tariffs, a protective tariff is a tax that protects local goods from foreign goods. So for instance, Americans want to make pencils. It costs 25 cents to make a pencil. But meanwhile, they've been making pencils for a very long time in England, and those English pencils are 5 cents. Well, 25 cents for an American pencil, 5 cents for a um, English pencil. Guess what? Most people are going to buy the English pencil because it might even be better quality and cheaper. Well, Federalists they want to support business. So what they want is they want a protective tariff. They want a tax on, let's say in this example, a tax on the pencil. They want a 25-cent tariff. So if it's the pencil's made in the United States, it does not get the tariff. So the pencil is 25 cents. If you want to buy the English pencil, well, it's 5 cents plus 25 cents on top of that. So now the English pencil is 30 cents. So what are you going to buy? The 25-cent pencil or the 30-cent pencil? Well, you'll probably buy the 25-cent pencil. The problem with this is you could have gotten a better pencil for 5 cents, but now because of this protective tariff, everything is more money. And Democrat Republicans oppose this. They're like, why are we paying more money just for American products if the American products are inferior? And when it comes to the foreign policy, Alexander Hamilton supports England. Yes, the people that we just had a rebellion against, the people that are still causing problems that we'll talk about in a little bit. The Democrat Republicans, well, because Thomas Jefferson was an ambassador to France, you know what? France helped us in the American Revolution. We should be friends with France. So, foreign alliances. Here's the problem. We make a treaty with France. Makes sense. France supported us. We sign a peace treaty with them, a treaty that we will support them. France goes to war with England. Okay, the Federalists say, let's side with England because you know what? They'll make us money. Democrat Republicans say, hey, let's side with France. And George Washington has a problem. What do I do? Well, Washington realizes that the country can't side with anyone because it's too weak. So he decides to issue what is called the Neutrality Proclamation. The Neutrality Proclamation says we are not siding with anyone. Now, this upsets France a lot, and there are going to be repercussions because of this later on during the presidency of John Adams. And finally, George Washington, after 8 years, decides he's going to retire. He gives a farewell address and he says, listen, here are two things that I've learned that you need to understand. Point number one, do not create political parties, it will destroy the country. And point number two, do not make alliances. You must stay neutral. Unfortunately, we don't really listen to the first one. And while we do listen to the second point, we only listen to it for about 100 years. And so, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have the end of George Washington. Have a great day, guys.